Hello.
Hey, Dana, how are you?
What is good with that beard and that hair?
Well, you know, I grew my beard when my brother was running for president.
I remember.
And I kept it, and now I can't get a haircut, so my hair is just all over the place.
Just let it all out there. You look like a mountain man.
Well, first of all,
I want to thank you for joining us. You know, a lot of the politicians don't want to do these kind of platforms because they want to make sure their questions are edited, their answers rather are edited. So first and foremost, from myself and everybody who's watching, thank you so much. We really appreciate you doing this because we've all got a lot of questions.
Yeah, of course.
How are you and your family, before we get started, how are you and your family handling, you know, the self-quarantine and this whole situation? Are you healthy and safe? Everybody's good?
Oh. These folks keep calling me about another committee call.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. We've got two kids, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, Roman and Andrea, and they've actually been pretty good. You know, they've started, like the last few days, they've started to get pretty restless, but otherwise we've been okay. It's been all right. Okay,
good. So let's get this started because I know people have a lot of questions, and every day, I can't imagine what your messages, you know, and your voicemail and everything looks like because I'm getting them. The number one question is, I can't get through the, you know, unemployment lines. Their website keeps crashing. One woman actually told me that she was on hold for 4 hours and then she heard something and she got excited and she got disconnected. So, you know, obviously you're a congressman in Texas, but people all over the country are experiencing this same issue. So what is the problem? What do you suggest? And do you have a solution for what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, you know, in the last few weeks, there have been 10 million Americans who've become unemployed, and millions of people have filed for unemployment benefits. In Texas, that number is about 300,000 over the last few weeks. So to answer your question, I mean, the system's just ask others to do is to surge extra state employees to the Texas Workforce Commission. And I know other governors are doing the same thing in their states so that you can basically handle the call volume. I'll tell you a story this morning because we've gotten in the last 2 weeks, we've gotten about 2,000 calls and emails from people. Most of those folks are they're trying to file for unemployment. I got a message this morning from somebody I went to middle school with who told me that she had called the Texas Workforce Commission 103 times. 103 times, and then finally got through, and she got through and then was sent somewhere else, and I think got disconnected also. So here's my advice. I mean, keep in your own state, whether you're in Texas or somewhere else, keep trying, but also reach out to your elected officials, whether it's your state representative, your member of Congress, because the state governments have what are called liaisons to other governments. So for example, the state government has a liaison to the members of Congress. We can call that person on your behalf and say, hey, this person is having a problem getting through. Will you please take their case, look at their case right now? So reach out to your other elected officials to see if they can help.
I always say, you know, everybody wants to go vote in these presidential elections, but it really is local elections that affect us most.
Sure.
The local politicians have more of a say-so in our everyday lives. So it's very important. Reach out to those local politicians. Now more than ever, it's important to be registered and participate in elections, please, especially on a local level. So the next one comes from me, and you know, I saw that you are also an advocate. I have been a very vocal advocate for farm workers for a long time, and right now, you know, most of us, I think, finally are starting to appreciate a grossly underappreciated section of our workforce. You know, I believe it's a matter of national security even to protect the farm workers. If they're not doing their job, we're not being fed. Every time I sit down for dinner and I'm enjoying a salad or a sandwich and I'm cutting tomatoes, vegetables, anything, I know that these workers are literally doing this back-breaking work, but they're not protected. So what do you suggest? You know, during this pandemic, we need to protect them. But even after, is Congress taking any steps to ensure that our food supply is still getting to we the people and also protecting the workers while they're going through this situation, through the pandemic, without any protection at all?
You're right. I know yourself and many of us have been saying for a long time that these folks are essential to American society and certainly to the American workforce. And now I think a big part of the country is coming to realize the same thing, that these folks are essential to us. And so one of the big tragedies of this last stimulus bill that we just passed is that many of those folks are going to get left out of the benefits, the unemployment benefits, the check that's coming to every American for $1,200, and then, you know, $500 for each dependent child. So we've been fighting to make sure that they're included because they are essential. And, you know, some of them are documented, but some of them are undocumented. But it's you know, it's part of the irony of this country that we're finally getting to see how valuable these folks have been to us. So we're going to keep pushing to make sure that they're included in this relief.
And I understand that a lot of people might have grievances when it comes to you saying undocumented, but when you talk to most farmers in this country, they wouldn't be able to operate without these people. Right. So, you know, I want to stress that I don't know about you. I'm not about open borders. I'm about reforming what it takes, you know, the immigration process to become a citizen and also a legal worker. That's what needs to happen, because we need
in Congress, and we did pass a few months ago a bill that would allow the farm workers to get legal status, those that don't have it, and ultimately to become citizens. But that bill it passed the House of Representatives. It's stuck in the Senate right now. Hopefully, this moment will inspire the U.S. Senate to finally pass that legislation.
I hope so. I hope so. So now we'll move on to, we went from hearing, you know, and let me tell you, I never believed it in the first place. Masks don't work, because I saw Singapore and South Korea the government issuing masks to their citizens. Now, I didn't say anything out loud because I certainly didn't want to endanger any of the healthcare workers or doctors. We wanted to make sure that they had all the PPE and masks that they needed. But when you see Friends of America issuing masks, and then we're saying, you don't need to wear a mask, and now they're saying wear a mask, you start to wonder who to believe. Also, we were promised tests, right? You see South Korea, they had their first case of coronavirus the same day we did. They've approached this very differently. They're doing mass testing. Yeah. We're the greatest country on earth. Where is the mass testing that we were promised? And then we were told not to wear masks. Now wear masks. I mean, how are we supposed to trust our officials? And also, what about the tests? Is there any solutions? Is there something going on behind the scenes? What is happening?
No, you're right. Look, I mean, without getting too political or pointing fingers and all that. But
I'll point all the fingers. I'll get political. You can stay neutral.
The response, like the federal response especially, was just mismanaged. It wasn't prepared for properly. In terms of the testing, right away, the FDA rejected these World Health Organization tests that other countries were using. So they said, we're not going to use your tests. So that delayed us. They didn't have confidence in it, or whatever it may have been. Other countries were using them. They didn't want to use them. And then initially they told the states, we don't want you to develop your own test. We want you to hold off until we have a test that we can give you. They later changed that rule so that states, when they figured out we're not going to be able to get all these tests across the United States, they told the states, go ahead and do whatever you want, basically. So what has happened is, yes, the tests have not been delivered the way they should. And also, that's the federal government. With the masks, right now, there are hundreds of millions of masks in the United States. So the problem is not an issue of supply. Like, there's enough masks. The problem is an issue of distribution. They're not in people's hands, right? Like, they're not going to the healthcare workers. They're not going to the people working in restaurants. You know, I keep coming back to this question. For example, in Texas and across the Southwest, they're building a border wall. And to do that, they're using eminent domain, the power of government, to go take people's property and then figure out what they're going to pay them later. I'm wondering why the federal government couldn't tell 3M and the major mask manufacturers, hey, we're going to take the mask that you have and we're going to pay you, we'll pay you 150%.
We'll pay you later.
Price. Yeah. You'll make a profit. You'll make more profit than you've made in a long time, but we're taking all your masks and we're going to distribute them out. Instead, what has happened is they're allowing these masks to be auctioned off to the highest bidder. So all the states are competing with each other. Private companies like Amazon and others are competing with each other, and it's driving the price up. And you got these people now making probably 10 times or more what the mask cost. That's why you heard this debate about the president using or not using the Defense Production Act. The Defense Production Act would have allowed the federal government to say to 3M and other companies, listen, just like they tell people, hey, we're taking your property, They've done that all the time to folks, not even in emergency situations. It would have allowed them to say, we're taking your masks, we're going to compensate you, we'll even give you above the retail price, but we're going to take them and we're going to distribute them. That didn't happen.
Our citizens, and that's our money, by the way. That's taxpayer money. We want these masks. We want our families to be safe, and it helps stop the spread of coronavirus.
And so to answer your question, Dana, a few things. Number one, like you're right, the advice that was given early on, you remember the CDC was saying, oh, it doesn't really matter if you're wearing a mask. You have to make sure that the person that's sick is wearing a mask. Well, really, it would be helpful if everybody, as many people as possible, are wearing a mask, right? And so yeah, I mean, it's a situation where they've given conflicting advice, and that the early advice was based, I think, not on what was the best medical advice, but what was the best medical advice given the availability of masks. And because that whole situation was bungled so badly, in getting tests out to different parts of their states. And I don't know, at this point, there's a part of me that wonders whether it's because the governor of Texas, for example, and other governors who've been slow to test, they don't want to be the face of the coronavirus. They don't want to end up in the news the way that New York is in the news. And by the way, Andrew Cuomo in New York, that's what you should be doing. You should be testing people to figure out who has the coronavirus so that they can get treated and you can stop the spread. Instead, what you have are people now in places like Texas dying in nursing homes because we're not doing as much as we should to stop the spread of this virus.
Well, it's disheartening because, you don't have to be an infectious disease expert or a doctor even or whatever to just kind of figure out that if you look at countries that are dealing with this better, why don't we follow that model? And it just seems we're doing the opposite every day. It just seems we're doing the opposite. And, maybe some people have weeks and weeks, but a lot of us don't. These companies can't pay employees. The layoffs continue and real families are hurt. But above all of that, we're talking about lives that are lost. I keep seeing people say, oh, it's only 97%. Well, what about the 3%? You're going to put your grandma out there then? Your mother? Like, I'm not. Yeah. I care about people, of course. And the job situation is also, not being able to work just prolongs a lot of suffering in this country. If we would just test everyone and really have a nationwide, I believe 14-day shutdown, it'd work. Now that's my next question. You said you didn't want to get political. Look, I'm not a fan of the Trump administration and I've never pretended to be. I'm not going to sit back. There's a lot of things that I dislike, but we're all in this together and I want him to succeed. Unfortunately, every day it just seems more and more bullshit. I'm sorry, just every day, it changes. First it was a hoax, then we got it under control, then it was like, I don't know. So we're in this together, so I want him to succeed. But the strategy to confront this virus, I feel like it's just all over the place. It keeps shifting. So every state doing this differently, every city. This virus doesn't know about state laws or city limits. It's just
boundaries. Yeah.
I saw that, I know in Texas, I think Governor Abbott did it. Governor, what's his name? I call him Governor Duncey, the guy from Arizona. It's not Duncey though. Ducey, yeah, but that's my name for him. Oh, golf is essential. You see people partying at the golf course. What action would you take if you were president today? If this was today and you became president, what would you do to change the strategy to dealing with this pandemic and ending what we're going through? People are suffering.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, I would have done my best to convince Americans that there's going to be short-term economic pain for longer-term health and prosperity. That, as you mentioned, you're going to have to shut down for a shorter period of time so that you can reopen faster by using that time to get rid of the virus. I would have, like I said, I would have gone to 3M and the other major mask manufacturers, and not only them, but the people that make ventilators, the companies that make ventilators, taken that property and equipment, compensated them above their retail price, and then distributed it out properly to the states. I also would not have played games the way that Donald Trump played games with states like Michigan and others, just because he thought that their governors were not nice to him. Literally, he didn't send as much equipment and masks and everything to places like Michigan because he thought that their governors were not appreciative enough. I mean, that's a very cold-hearted move.
It's not just cold. People you know, I keep saying these statistics, you hear these numbers, they're not just numbers. These are people, these are people's families.
Right.
You know, while we're talking numbers, somebody's trying to figure out how to bury their family member, how they're going to have a funeral during a self-quarantine. You can't, you know, it's a terrible situation. And I just wish that we could have one cohesive message from the top so that we can get past this a lot sooner, because a lot of us just don't have the luxury of time. Not only do we care about our families, but you know, we want to, obviously their health, but we also care about putting food on the table to feed our families. And most of us just don't have the luxury of weeks and weeks and weeks of prolonged self-quarantine.
Yeah, no, there needed to be a national stay-at-home order rather than allowing cities and states to do their own thing for 3 weeks.
The virus is going to cross state lines. It doesn't care what you say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know, absolutely. And now, I mean, now you have the economic part where landlords are demanding rent, you know, where all your bills are coming due. And look, I'm glad that Congress, part of this CARES package, but that's not going to be enough. You know, I mean, you know, the rent in most places is at least $1,200, if not more. And then you've got the light bill, the water bill, all these other things. So Congress has to do more, and the president needs to do more in terms of relief for individuals and for small businesses.
No, I agree 100%. And last, you know, Bernie's dropped out. Bernie is no longer a candidate for the presidency. How do you feel about that? And what do you think, you know, what do you think his reasoning was for dropping out now and just saying it's over, I'm moving forward?
Well, I think his reasoning is to bring unity to the Democratic Party, to help bring unity to the Democratic Party. And of course, my brother Julian ran for president, so we had a chance to see Senator Sanders' campaign up close. And, you know, I was thinking about it this morning, and actually I've been thinking about it before, but he will go down as somebody who, more than any other person probably in modern American history, who didn't become president, had as much impact on the direction of the politics of the country as anybody in, you know, probably the last 100 years has.
Absolutely.
I mean, in other words, of course, he was competing to win. He was competing to become president. But in a sense, it almost doesn't matter that he didn't become president, because his impact has been so profound on the direction of the nation's politics. I mean, you look at what we're talking about now. Medicare for all has become a very popular, you know, even you think about that, to get a policy position from a place where nobody is talking about it a few years ago to a place where probably, let's just say 50% of the country thinks it's a good idea or more, right? I mean, that's an incredible thing to be able to do for somebody who never even got the nomination, right? So
he shifted so many of the policies, but also the way of thinking. I've always said, you know, socialism is such a bad word and nobody wants a socialist country. When he says these things, I think he could have done a better job explaining. For instance, the Republican Party has been against Social Security for elders and Medicare for elders. They call that socialism. My Nana lived a dignified life, not a luxurious life, but because of those programs, which were touted, you know, way back when as socialist programs. I don't think it's a socialist idea to say, let's do 4 more years of school or technical school, and let's at least have a public option at the very least. Those aren't socialist ideas. They're an extension of policies that a lot of our families depend on right now. My Nana would not have been able to live without Social Security and her Medicare. Yeah. So it's not, you know, that word socialism, nobody wants a socialist country. I just think he did a bad job explaining that, you know. I hope somebody else learns to explain that a little bit better. Do you have any aspirations to run for president?
Me, no. I left that to my brother. I was happy to support him and help him. And, you know, I'm very proud to represent my hometown of San Antonio. And I served in the state legislature for 10 years. I've been in Congress now for, I guess, about 8 years. So I won't be in politics forever, but probably a few more years.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking this time. I appreciate it. Keep doing the good work and fighting for the people. We appreciate it very much.
Thanks,
I thank you so much. Talk to you again soon. Bye.
For sure. Take care.